Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're here today to talk about web scraping and data protection. This is a pretty difficult and intricate area. I'm Michael Veale. I'm from UCL. And the name of this panel is Dragnet Data Protection. We just made that up. It's sort of designed to capture the idea that some methodologies, both in research, in practice, and industry, and so on, are really slurping up large amounts of data from the public web, and it's creating conceptual challenges in data protection and also in research ethics in many, many directions. There's a lot of reasons we might want to do this. So web scraping is, as we think of it, typically something that you do when data is not really available in a more structured format. And so we've seen there's different definitions of web scraping. For example, when you access data through an API, then that's a bit more structured, and sometimes a platform provides data about its users or about its posts or similar. But when that's not available, you often have to pretend to be a user in order to get that data, or pretend to be just a browser of the internet. And when you try and pretend to be a browser to try and see the internet like a human would and then turn it into a format that's more parsable by machines for whatever your purpose is, that creates a whole load of questions because you capture lots of things that you're not intended to. So the structure of this session, we want to think about scraping. And why do we want to scrape in the first place? I'd suggest there's a few reasons. Maybe we want to create a corpus of data for machine learning training. Maybe we want to measure and monitor phenomena online, like how many websites there are, what are their security properties, and similar. Maybe we want to audit and hold to account platforms and online services. Are we seeing lots of disinformation, for example, or election interference? Maybe we want to study social phenomena. How do people make communities govern themselves online, and how do they fall apart? We might want to, as researchers, review a lot of academic literature, try and get back the things we wrote from the publishers that seem to have taken it from us, and to see what they said. Or if you're somewhere like the Internet Archive or Library Sciences or somewhere, you might be trying to create a historical record of what's happened online for future generations or historians or similar to go and use and look through. So we're also seeing in this context, the first, creating a corpus of information, becoming really important to the economy, apparently. And the scraping large amounts of data online has become the mode of operation for many AI companies. Also integrating that scraping in real time, when you ask a question of an AI firm or AI chatbot or similar, it will then in turn go and often scrape or return cached versions of websites it's found earlier. And agentic AI systems interact with that. They go further. They don't just receive the information. They do send a query to get that, but they also will try and maybe input something on a website for you. And all of this often involves scraping to some degree as well. And in response to that, we see a lot of websites blocking scraping, and often using companies like Cloudflare to help them block it. And those business models are kind of emerging in that space. In that broad context, we're interested in a few things on this panel. One, what is the role for scraping in the public interest when we want to study things, hold things to account, and similar? Should we be allowed to scrape as a university, for example? How does that interact with some of the powerful actors that are determining those rules? How do we deal with just the nature of scraped data? It's big, it's qualitative, it's messy, and it contains a lot of sensitivities that are hard to reason about. And what does this look like in research practice, through the whole flow of a university, from a researcher navigating a project in real time to making sure that universities have all the right compliance procedures and proper scrutiny with real meaningful oversight in place over these activities. So I've got a great panel. We'll go through for some sort of reflections on this topic from their perspectives in order, and then we'll open up both to questions and to the room. I want to start with Sophie Stalla-Bourdillon. Sophie is runs the co-director of the Brussels Privacy Hub, and is visiting professor at the University of Southampton, where she also was for many years, has gone between lots of different roles in academia, industry, public policy, all kinds of things, and is a really leading thinker on a lot of cutting-edge issues of technology, statistics and law, scraping and law, as more recent and older work has touched upon, and has been doing really interesting recent work about scraping, law, platform accountability, and similar. So, Sophie, tell us what are your views on this emerging area?
Thank you so much, Michael. So I was told to be short and sharp. I not sure whether I will be sharp, but I'll try to be short. Recently, actually not so much recently, because probably 3 years ago, with computational sociologists, we started to think about scraping. Had done some work in the past on platform regulation, trying indeed to cater for the public interest, but then left that field and then come back because a computational sociologist rang on my door telling me that is not possible. I'm trying to do my research in the public interest and I'm being told I cannot scrape. Please help me. So what was happening at the time? She was a researcher in a leading university trying to do some very interesting research on gig platforms. And she was trying to build a research project with the help of the legal service at the university. But the advice that she got was that she should first start to contact the platform. She contacted the platform and she got not so nice answer. There was a no, a very clear no, you should not do that. We are not interested in research in the public interest. And she received various reasons for that refusal. She was not happy with that. She went back to university. University tried to help, and the answer from the university was to outsource the legal advice from a very high-profile law firm to a very high-profile law firm who tried to analyze objectively the situation. But again, the answer came back with a no, you should not scrape. We cannot really help you. Wait for the DSA. The DSA came, but we still have, and dealing with the same question. I'm not sure the DSA in itself is actually solving the problem. There are various reasons why scraping in the public interest, at least legally, this is where I start, might raise some questions. There is, of course, contract law, IP law, and data protection law. This was the angle I was looking at. But if we set emotions aside and conservativeness, data protection law in itself is not necessarily the most, I would say, problematic body of law. I would start there, actually. Especially if you look at we've got some very recent draft guidelines also on scientific research where there is an attempt to try to tackle that very problem. I'm not sure. They could do a little bit better, maybe. I think they are still working on the assumption that platforms are welcoming requests from researchers. That might not be the case. But we ended up coining the concept of adversarial scraping because this is, in the end, the only approach that seemed to be logical and working for a use case. Don't start by asking for permission. Just build the case from the start and just do it. As long as you have some ethical backing, I should not speak too quickly. There is an ethical process in place in universities that should support the action. And when universities are organized well, we will see that later on, they are able to do both the ethical process and the legal compliance process together. One thought just on that, I mean, we will probably go back to how universities help researchers and whether they could improve in that direction. When there is too much duplication also of processes for the researchers, that is not necessarily very helping and helpful. It's much better when this is all integrated and we don't simply think in terms of compliance. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I think that's really a great vignette of some of the sort of flows of challenges that are going through. I wanted to move to Thomas. Thomas Vandamme is postdoc at ULB here and has used different scraping methods in his research, a computational researcher, and now in a law faculty, I believe in the criminology and law faculty at ULB. And the question I want to sort of pose, or the sort of framing question, but please give your first remarks, is just what's it like for researchers? So at the moment, when you try and go into this method of scraping, it's it's often something that people don't always publish fully about exactly how they've done it, and it's a bit of an art. What does it feel like, and how's it been changing over recent years in your experience? What's it like to do that kind of scraping as a researcher?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's very interesting. My PhD thesis was about assessing the capacities of some systems that are black boxes.
Can you come closer? It doesn't go any further.
All right, that's
I'll
fine.
use this one.
I'm
Use
good.
this, okay.
I'm fine. Okay. And to do that, I needed, well, legal decisions, so publicly available in theory, and I needed access to systems that are actually rendered, they're made available by the public institutions. This is where it gets tricky because it's impossible to bulk download all of the decisions. It's impossible to access the model itself. I have to do all of that through the interfaces. And there are limitations to the interfaces. As we all know, there are anti-bots procedures, there are browser fingerprintings, there are rate limiting, so it's very hard to actually like automate and be very fast in it. So I'm an engineer by trade. So it is like my job. I am an IT engineer, and for me, it took more than a year getting all of this data for my own research. So I have to say it's very... What institution? Sorry, ULB. The institution itself, there are several. So I'm doing in intellectual property offices. So these are, just to name a few, the EYPO, the WIPO, the Benelux office for intellectual property. And these are, well, institutions. So it's not easy to get your way around it. And I have to say that some of these are easier than others. So let's just keep it at that. So it's very hard. In practice, what I do, which I think was your question, is I go on the website and I analyze and, okay, I need these decisions. These appear in this, well, I can get to them with this particular search query. And then I need to partition it. So like, okay, from this day to this day, and then that day to that day, and so on. And I go through the process. So instead of doing the clicks, I have a code, an algorithm that I develop, and click by click, element by element, I try to find the way to click on the element, to find the element, and to go through it. And every time I have to do something, there are hurdles, there are complications. And just to cite a few, well, the rate limiters, so I have to implement some sort of logical behaviors, so I cannot click too fast, because then I get flagged and I get ejected from the system. I cannot keep the same IP for too long, so I have to opt between VPNs, which is, I think, a gray area from a legal and ethical standpoint, but we'll get to that, I guess, and so on and so forth. So, and then again, there is the ultimate, I would say, hurdle, the big boss of the game, which is the captchas and the puzzle that you have to solve, which honestly I did not solve myself. Well, I didn't go that far, but there are actually ways online to do that. So there are companies offering their services, sort of mechanical Turks. So you have, this is a real name actually.
Are humans just solving these captchas?
They claim that it's for an AI filtering, and then some of the harder captchas go to humans, allegedly. But I think there is, in the third world, there are quite a lot of issues. So it's a very complicated process.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that raises already a lot of issues, particularly the third-party companies. You mentioned VPNs. There are particular companies using residential proxies, trying to go inside people's home networks where they sort of sell access to their home IP, which is a trusted kind of one, and people scrape from those. And capture services, obviously, and capture solvers, and that's quite an old industry. There's some, for 15 years and has developed, I think, a lot over time. And so all of this is, I think, speaks to this kind of very ad hoc cat and mouse game. I think Thomas's research showed it's a lot of care and bespoke thought from researchers all the time, particularly if you want to make sure you get all the documents, and methodological integrity to the work you're doing. So think with that in mind, that kind of ad hoc process, I want to turn to Alexandra Potts. Alexandra Potts is the Chief Privacy Officer and Data Protection Officer at University College London. And UCL is one of the largest, if not so by students at least, the largest university in the UK. And so lots of things come across your desk. So In light of the kind of nature of this complex data, these ad hoc processes and so on, what's it like being DPO at UCL, having these kind of things appear on your desk? What conceptual challenges do you have? What procedural challenges? Can the law be better?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's really great to be here. I think I really want to draw on Sophie's comments about who is providing advice in the university and who are they providing that to. So I'm a qualified solicitor coming up for nearly 20 years post-qualification experience, and I'm fairly pragmatic as a lawyer. So if a question comes to me, I can usually find a relatively quick answer. The point is, it takes a long time for a question to come to me. So just to talk through how we do ethics and data protection review of any research at all in UCL. So I lead the data protection team, and we run the research registration part, and that is separate from the ethics process. And I think it's probably, as you're saying, Sophie, it comes to that first point of universities are just really complicated, and they're really complicated beasts who have just, UCL's been around for 200 years, and things spring up and they continue as they are. So I think that first point of, if you get trips up in any of these various areas, that will lead to delay. And I'll chat through what the various areas are, but it's that point of the more complex a legal question is, the more likely you are to have delay. So I'm also a member of the Research Ethics Committee and a high-risk reviewer as well. So I do see those research projects which are deemed to be high risk. So in terms of our data protection research registration, it is one person who does it, and it's a relatively junior member of staff. That means that in practice, if you have a fairly simple question, if it's research that's been done before, we get through those really, really quickly. If it's something which is coming to us and the question is just complicated, and particularly now, if you've got AI in anything at all, it's just raising red flags. It may not actually be high risk for any reason, but the fact that someone is seeing AI means they go, oh, I probably need to send that on to another reviewer. I need to check that with someone else. And then in terms of the high-risk ethical reviews, so my role as a reviewer, it is literally 3 of us on a Zoom call going through our thoughts about an ethics application. And therefore, if the ethics application isn't drafted in a way that makes sense to a non-technical specialist, regardless if it's clear to the person that's drafting it, we're going, but I just don't understand. And so what we're doing is potentially causing delay to any approvals. In all of these, we're very unlikely to say no. We're not here to stop research, we're definitely here to enable it. But the point is, you're likely to get your yes slower. And you can imagine if we've got a research registration process where the yes is slower, if we've got ethics where it's slower, if you've got any form of contract negotiation to happen that's slower, all of these just mean that we're starting from a point of complex legal questions, such as, I've been told I can't scrape, but surely that shouldn't mean that any website can just put in their terms and conditions, we don't want to be scraped, and then they can't be researched. That doesn't, as you're saying, Sophie, that when it's properly thought about, you think, well, we need to find a way through this. But the point of the finding the way through that is, I think, where we're finding the delays. And as we know, quite often that either happens, it's a chilling effect. People just say, I'm just not going to touch it because actually it's complicated. Yes, it's a great area of research, but it's going to take me so long to do. Or people just give up, or they go, you know what, if I do X, Y, Z, like, how about we just don't look at any personal data there? And then you're going, okay, fine, that means you can get your research through the review process quicker, but in reality, you're taking away from the research you actually wanted to do. So I think kind of summing that all up, the lack of clarity means that our processes are slower, which I think potentially hinders the research happening in the first place.
Great, thanks, Alex. Get questions ready, because what I'm going to do after we sort of finish the round, we'll do a bit of reflection if anyone wants to come in on other people's thing, and then we'll sort of mix some questions with the audience, and if people are still thinking, I'll give some questions. So I'll want to open up the room kind of collaboratively, because too many CPDP panels, maybe just leave the last 10 minutes, and I think we should do the room more fully. We've got so many experts in the room who are not on the panel. So I want to start to Luc Rocher. Luc Rocher is Associate Professor at University of Oxford and one of the UKRI Future Leaders Fellows. Luc and I have done a variety of different things together over the years. And one thing that Luc is known for, and many of you in the room, I think, will have read Luc's research on this, is their work on privacy and anonymization and the failures of anonymization, the difficulties of dealing with quite complex types of data sets in this. And just So Luke, the kind of data that we get from and during a scraping process, how do you think about it from your disciplinary standpoint? Its risks, what we can do about it, what it even is.
All right, let's try to unpack this. So I think that there's two types of data scraping. You have the very indiscriminate one that is typically done by like industry AI labs, where you try to collect all the web. It's like, I don't know, like an industry ship that goes and rake all the bottom of the ocean, and then you're not sure if you have, like, you know, is it a fish? Is it a bottle? Is it a plastic bag? Is it a dolphin? You collect everything. And that is quite difficult because then you need to go into every document to try to find what it is made of. And often it's not possible. And we have this huge data set that are full of, like, you know, children sexual abuse materials, CSEM, you have photos, you have copyrighted materials, and often there's no way to automatically detect this at scale, at least. Then you have the very, like, very precise, like, you know, line fishing. Maybe if we want to take the same analogy, that often independent researchers will do. They don't care about collecting terabytes of data. They want to collect specifically, all the ads on a specific politician in a specific countries in a given month on the platforms. And that is much more precise. And so it means it's also much easier to apply safeguards. And if we think in terms of, like, you know, which safeguards could be applied, I think there's a range of safeguard that can be done to reduce any sort of risk and probably achieve compliance with some of the data collections. If you want, you want to collect a data set of photos of cats and dogs. What happens if you go on Google across the world and you type a beautiful cat or beautiful dog? So probably you want to remove any sort of like metadata, the location that is in the photo, that sort of thing is quite easy. Maybe you want to remove also things that are, like, also obvious, like, if you search for beautiful cat, you don't want a photo of someone at a party dressed as a cat. And so that would be quite obvious that it's a person, it can be identified. Moving on, you have more, I would say, direct identifiers. It's a photo of a letter from the vet with, the photo of the cat, but also the address of the owner. That sort of thing potentially can be identified through OCR, looking at the text, finding name, addresses, email addresses. It's getting a bit harder, but it's also sometimes feasible. And then you have the third tier, which is you have a photo of a cat. And you see that, it's outside, there's a lot of light, it's quite bright, and you have the shades, so you think it's like midday, but also it's outside and you see, maybe the beach, and given the color of the beach, it's quite clear, you think it might be the Bahamas. And you look at the cat, and the cat has only the left whiskers, and you're like, I recognize Michael's cat, only with the left whiskers, so I know that Michael was in the Bahamas instead of teaching at UCL, and because, Michael brought his cat. And then you have personal data, you have the location of Michael through this. And that, I think, is probably quite residual and is very difficult to analyze at scale. And so the question is not necessarily where you stop, but what sort of risk you consider and what is realistic. Definitely, if you do like complete indiscriminate collection of data, it's going to be quite difficult to protect, again, all sort of things like this, like finding the identity, location of Michael through the photo of the left whisker only cat. But at the same time, if you only want to collect very precise information because you care about price fixing on online marketplaces, you're not going to get photo of cats. You're not going to get CSEM. You're going to get the prices of items online. And so the risk is probably, it's inexistent because you're just collecting the prices of objects online. So I think just banning data scraping under the premise of privacy, data protection, I think is not, basically you just think of like AI labs, catching everything on the web and the industry ship and not the people line fishing for a very particular set of information.
Excellent. Yeah, so I think we've got lots of different vibes from the panel and lots of dynamics we've seen at play. I'd like if anyone has any questions initially. If not, we'll go for a round and we'll ask. Please, let's get some questions. We'll collect two here. Oh, there we go.
I think that's okay.
Perfect.
Hi, fantastic panel. My question is from the standpoint of like international law and the principle of territoriality. Can really we even regulate the scraping of public data? Because for instance, the EU can't set the rules for the whole world, and we don't know for instance, to which data subject located in what jurisdiction a certain data point pertains to. So are we supposed to, I suppose we shouldn't just label every single data point with a certain jurisdiction label and then apply laws based on that. Thanks.
That's a great question. I'll take the comment as well.
Yeah, Konrad Kolnick, Maastricht University. Sorry, Thomas, for interrupting. I was asking about the institutions because I've been trying to get data out of the EU Publications Office, and they are based on Cloudflare, and they block me, and it's really hard. And why does it run on Cloudflare? I don't know. But the question I really have is, I mean, lots of people, I mean, when people talk about web scraping, I think the first thing that they may talk about is Twitter. And it seems like the environment around Twitter scraping is quite adversarial, right? You know, I mean, Twitter, or whatever it's called now, will throw everything at you that they may find, right? Like data protection issues, and they might well arise on social media. But also when you look at the terms and conditions, they don't just say you can't scrape. They say if you scrape, we might slap contractual fines onto you that are in the tens of thousands of euros. So, I mean, how would a researcher navigate that? Because there seem to be real risks.
Great. So who wants to take some of these? We've got the where do things happen on the internet and who do they happen to and how do we even know? Which is a big perennial question for internet regulation. And then, yeah, if anyone wants to go on the contract point, you know, just to note, I think on that, lots of national divergence and differences around this kind of add to this complexity. So people might have some different views from different jurisdictions or approaches on that. Let's take one or both of these.
I can start by saying maybe you start by trying to comply with the law where you're established, even if you cannot exactly locate where your data subjects are. But yeah, there is not exactly a very good answer here. Unfortunately, this is why starting simply by the question of legal compliance without any insight or thinking about ethics behind legal compliance is not necessarily very helpful, maybe. But then you also need to think in terms of risks and harm. I think beyond the purely legally formal legal questions.
And then picking up on that Twitter question, I can answer what we've done in the past practically in UCL because of that point of, well, what's the risk? So in that, what it comes down to quite often is, how is the researcher explaining that they've understood the risk? So yeah, we certainly don't take the simple, there's T's and C's that say you can't do it. That comes back to, well, why can a company just decide it can't be researched? But what I have had is a researcher send something to me from GoFundMe where they had already scraped the data and then sent it to me and then said, this is fine, right? And you go sort of, well, the very fact that you have sent that data to me when you don't need to contravenes the principle of data minimization and also shows that you don't understand what you're doing with the data. So I think, therefore, we come back to that. How well is the researcher explaining what they're doing to enable us to take those risk-based decisions? Because, yes, Twitter might say, we're going to sue you, we're definitely going to sue you. A pragmatic DPO can probably go, yeah, but are they really? And or get legal advice to say, this is something Twitter are really interested in. So actually, if you're going to do it, you do need to be careful. So I think, yeah, it comes back to how well are we articulating the risks in order to enable those on the ethical review side to properly review them.
Great. Anything else? If not, we'll take some other questions. Yeah, so Joe, you go first and then we'll go back.
I have a question for Sophie, also from Maastricht University. Do you believe that published information should be a public good in the sense that it should be available to everyone, barring, privacy and IP individual rights?
Cool. We'll take a couple, and then we'll group them together because I think we'll be able to do that.
Hiya, thanks so much. Great panel. And my question goes a bit into the technical barriers that are now getting implemented, as you mentioned also with Cloudflare. Because I scraped a lot in my research as well, and I think a certain amount of research I could just not do anymore because of these technical protections that we see now. And I do think also that certain platforms also have valid reason to do so, right? Because I also would not like to have my content being scraped by some random AI company. So my question goes a bit more into the legal solutions that we could have and kind of your assessment, for instance, the enforcement of like robots.txt or like terms and conditions. Could there maybe be a legal solution against all this AI scraping? And could that maybe then help websites to, allow researchers access? Because I do think there are some platforms, a little amount of platforms that might be open for that. But again, I do think with the web scraping amount that we see now, it gets a bit challenging. Thank you.
Great. We'll take those two, and then we've got plenty of time to go for more rounds. So I've got people who want to come afterwards. Great. So two also very tricky questions here. Who wants to give?
I think the first question was for me.
Yeah.
My answer would be purpose limitation. It depends. I guess it depends for what you want to use the data. I don't think there is an absolute answer, an absolute yes to your question. I like more nuance and see what you want to do with the data, because obviously you can do lots of different things with data. Some can be very harmful for the people behind the data. So yeah.
So I think we'll come back to your published data as well, because I think we'll come back both in other questions and in general. So the second question is that Julia had the question on the law in this. So I think one thing seems to be kind of a theme, which is all this blocking is happening due to economic and social consequences. But should researchers have a way through? So maybe Thomas, maybe on the kind of what would you see as a potential method around the anti-bot tools that you mentioned and similar that may have some connection with law and legal?
Yes. Well, then, first of all, I think nobody will disagree with me that we need legal certainty about the fact that we can indeed scrape. I think that's the overarching theme of this panel. But then functionally, and the fact is that we as researchers do not have unlimited resources. Actually, we quite have the opposite. And some of us, and particularly in social sciences, we do not have the capacity or the knowledge and the know-how to do that. So I think from that standpoint, I don't see any other option than having some sort of a backdoor through the systems, right? Either through asking the data providers themselves, which we've seen is quite hard to have, even with institutions, or by ways of law and the IP blockers and anti-bot systems themselves. Now, how can we do that? That's a very good question. And we would need to have research committees' approvals, and we need to have authentication and limited scope of scraping. But I think that would be a very, very good thing indeed for the science.
So if we get this kind of a backdoor approach in a way, thinking about Alex and Luc, you're both sort of part of the sort of chain of governance around this, in terms of the work that you do that follows the actual scraping. What should be the conditions for researchers who want to sort of bypass anti-bot scraping? So let's imagine a world where we get Cloudflare's agreement to have a key, and the university could say, actually, Cloudflare's given us a key that we can give out to researchers that goes past anti-block, and they may be obliged to do that by statute. What should be the conditions before you, particularly Alex, I guess, give that key out? So let's say you've got the key ring and you can hand out the key to researchers, and that's the condition that we do to maintain as a university that only the kind of good, non-destructive scraping that's good consideration of risk and safeguards. So what would you like to see a researcher do before you give that key out?
And I think almost to build on that is this: what is the definition of research, scientific research, the Article 9 definitions? Because I was just in the debate panel about healthcare research and whether or not the technological company BrainX was able to rely on the research legal basis of processing. And so almost that's a really interesting question for me, and perhaps where this is going is, well, what is the scope of research? Because I think we're probably going to say most academic research in a research-intensive university such as UCL, which has been through the ethical review process, probably everyone's going to say, of course you can have the key. That's the entire reason for the key. But what happens when you are getting to research that's being commercialized? What happens when you're getting to the R&D arm of BrainX, for example? So where does that lie? And I think that's particularly relevant at the moment because of the changes in the law. So the changes with the UK Data Protection Act potentially making the definition of research wider, the recent opinions under EU law about whether commercial research falls under that definition of research. So if we've got society as a whole going towards commercialization of research being seen as research in the way that the law perhaps used to be more prescriptive, then how does this, we get these powers, we get these abilities, do we then need to then restrict the use of those to just academic institutions, or are we happy for them to be more commercial? Because if it is more commercial, we're then going to have the websites going, no, that's not the point of this. We allowed this for public good. Right. We didn't allow this for our competitors.
Great, thanks. Luke? Well.
Maybe to go to the other direction, I think that I wouldn't divide researchers as like industry versus university. I think there's a whole range of research outside industry and a university that, like, I don't know, encompass like independent researchers, journalists, investigative journalists that often don't have the means to access data, don't have the money to pay, and will not necessarily be considered when they say, hey, I'm a researcher, but actually your employment letter say you're a journalist. I think if you're an industry company, the amount is quite good. You just pay like, 500 to 8,000 a month, and you get all the social media data you want historically across platform in real time. You want news, you get all the news. If you don't have the money, you go on the Internet Archive, and now you just find nothing because news are being news providers are blocking the Internet Archive. Social media is not there. If you scrape, you get sued, so it's quite bad. And the issue is that the people most at risk, because they don't get legal protection from universities, are also the most likely not to get the key from Cloudflare, probably, because who's going to gatekeep and say, oh, you're a good researcher and you're a bad researcher? It should not be Cloudflare to decide who is a researcher. And at the moment, even under the DSA, we decide who is a vetted researcher, who can access TikTok, Facebook, Instagram at the platform, and the platform make decision. Last year, we asked if we could get data from TikTok, and we got a response, I think, a month ago, say, a year after, say, we would like to get more information from you, and we're at the university. So, I think the concept of having an organization, even a private organization, decide who is legally authorized to access, I think should not, I don't know, I don't think it should work this way.
Oh, great.
Can I? Yeah, maybe before deciding who should get the key, maybe this is we need a liability shield in some ways that is made much more explicit than what we have in the DSA, and we should start from there and see to what extent the researcher can play that cat and dogs game, and then where you get blocked, then maybe you get the key.
We should get great. So you had a question as well. So let's get the microphone there, and then anyone else who has a question they want to add? Please.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. The original concept is wonderful, and I love the conversation. I'm Katalin Fehér Leuven, and I'm just considering a very philosophical question. So if somebody wants to pick up, this is an opportunity. Over the last few months, we scrapped a lot of data from LinkedIn to understand what happened in AR narratives. Especially in the global north, because LinkedIn is focusing on this geopolitical part and this market of AI. And we learned a lot during this time. First of all, we learned how LinkedIn is not so responsible and not so responsive to work with academic people, even if I had a direct contact in the management. Okay, this is not a promotion, just sorry. The other point is about our capacity building, because we had to focus on not just on the tool, how we could survive in this case, but we had to build own API on cloud. We had to have different kind of resources to this, and also upskilling in the team and finding contributors. So that was a real capacity building for us, and we had to understand how the academic role in research, I'm not talking about the market research, academic research is changing in the society, how the understanding is so complex in this case. And I would like to echo Alexandra's key question, the definition of scientific research, how this is changing, not just at a university, but generation by generation now, or intergeneration way. So I'm just considering what will be the role of academic research in the pretty close future if the platform-driven market is changing pretty fast, especially in generative AI. And we want to be in the loop, human in the loop story. We know the context or this kind of buzzword. But in parallel, a lot of robots are just driving the social media platforms, the internet, and the real human input is starting to disappear from this. Maybe all of us know about the dead internet theory. This is not just a conspiracy theory. This is the technical story around us. This is a context. So I just want to understand, what do you think about this very turbulent time when we want to be an agency as academia in this story, and we want to be the part of this human agency progress, but not to be anti-bots, just, to be the part of the platform-driven society. Briefly. Sorry, this is very complex in my mind.
A big provocation and lots to unpack there.
I'm doing all the time provocation.
Thank you. It's good. It was very rich. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Incredible panel so far. I'm very interested in this idea of potential keys, but one concern I have is cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. How do you create this kind of backdoor only for researchers and not malicious hackers? And also generally, it sounds like there are a lot of ethical standards at universities and stuff like that. How are you thinking of protecting this personal data, in addition to data minimization and et cetera? But from a cybersecurity perspective, how do you protect the personal data you're using for your research? Thank you.
Good, right. So turbulence, lots of, to summarize on that one, I think there's lots of really, the resource of university, the technical debt, building all of these scraping tools only for tomorrow for them not to work and all the people to move away, right? I think Thomas will have some things to say about this aspect, and maybe Luke. Academic research in the world of the dead internet, in the world of robots, and also in a different acceptance of bots. If they have a different kind of role, then maybe we shouldn't be as afraid of engaging in an automated way, and maybe that's the way we have to go. And of course, the two sides of this. So backdoors that only the good guys can go through. I have a few thoughts on that, but I'll give to the panel primarily. And then maybe Luke, you want to say about the what even can we do with the data to protect it afterwards. So Thomas, can I pass to you first?
Yeah. It's a very valid point, actually. The lack of capacity to contain and to build skills in this field. I'm in a faculty of law, so I do a lot of legal and social sciences conference, and this is a very recurring topic. So the fact that social scientists have limited resources, especially in digital technologies. So what we have been doing actually in our own laboratory, so the Juris Lab at the ULB, seeing this is that we thought maybe we can help the community, and the community can help back in building what we call low-code or no-code alternatives to scraping. So we'd like to have some sort of open source or limited source in case of authentication for researchers to get access to these tools and be able to just select the elements and just so on. So some companies already have these kinds of solutions, so you can go online and pay for them. The issue is that these are closed source solutions, so you cannot adapt them. They are very limited in what you can do and how you can circumvent the limitations of the anti-bot systems. But we believe that as a community, as a research community, we can do quite good, quite a lot of good with these common tools. Furthermore, it is my opinion, and I hear that Luc already mentioned a bit of this, but private companies that would have this open source software, it is my belief that they already have these kinds of in-house tools, and they don't need researcher helps to do this. So I think we have to act in the open, to gather a lot of momentum around this, and we should not fear the use of our own tools in, well, maybe not malicious, but commercial tracks. So.
Sophie, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I think that aligns because for the paper that we wrote, we actually ran a series of interviews with researchers, and I think what Thomas said just aligned exactly what the answers. Luc.
I mean, there's this joke that goes by, if public libraries were invented today, they would probably be illegal. And I think that's probably the same for scraping. And we're at the stage where, like, I don't know, if we had, like, I don't know, we had thought about this before, it would be a given that, yeah, like, information in the public interest should be publicly available. And there's a lot of things that are quite straightforward, like, you know, local news are being much harder to access, and it's very important for historians. And at the moment, we're all on our own in front of a computer trying to figure out how to bypass the Cloudflare or Google CAPTCHA. And I don't think that should be the case. And I agree I think Catalin used about community building, but I think we need, I don't know, to do this together. And I don't know, if the EU Commission don't want to be the gatekeepers, then universities should probably take the lead and say, okay, we're going to be the one with the legal support of our DPO, and we're going to say, oh, we have a platform, and you can just, I don't know, request access, and we will provide access on a trusted research environment where you can access all the data we scraped. And probably even if it's for another project, we're going to get approvals that everyone can come. We as a university can determine if you're a researcher or not, and you will have access to our platform, and on our platform you will be able to do our analysis on, I don't know, like 5 years of Twitter data that we access from 2015 to 2020. And I think that would solve a lot of hassle from a lot of people who don't have the means of going and scraping and don't have the legal protection for this. But I don't think many universities do this at the moment. There's a question of infrastructure. You need to build a platform. If you do it in the open, we had like a social science one that failed, etc. Probably you need a trusted physical infrastructure where people remotely connect and do the analysis on the actual data without trying to anonymize it, because it's not possible to do so.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, because building on that, because Michael and I are doing a research project along with a academic in computer science, and that's certainly something we've been discussing just in practice for UCL. And I think it comes back to that kind of the clarity and the delay point, because yes, that might take a while to set up, but then it's done, and then lots of different people can access it. Whereas if we've got lots of people trying to do smaller projects, that those delays are just going to snowball likely. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'm really interested in exploring for UCL.
I want to be a very rude moderator and just address the question about the doorway that only good people can go through. I think there's a practical reality that Cloudflare are creating these keys already. So the WebBot auth standard that they are proposing, the IETF, is exactly that, to say, OpenAI, they're going to pay us some money so they get access to the website or they meet these standards. So I totally agree. I think it's probably not best phrased, it isn't in public discourse, as a backdoor, right? Because that comes with a lot of the, it's already a door. It's not a back door. Actually, Cloudflare is trying to make it into the front door. And we just want a key to the front door like the AI companies are probably going to get. And maybe we need to make sure those AI companies don't always get the key or under different conditions. So yeah, I think that's a really important point that we think all the way through the process. And of course, the university is going to have to be very responsible with these keys, right? Because if they then leak, then the private governance goes, and it might not be the end of the world for the websites. They could just revoke or block them, but it'll probably be the end of the world for the universities getting the keys in the future.
And I think to build on that, that's what we've seen with Biobank and the data leaks in China. If you are reliant on individual researchers doing the right thing because they say they'll do the right thing, that's a massive risk. And so I think what we're starting to see, certainly following Biobank, is the question of, okay, but who gets to have control over these data sets? And yeah, does that control need to be more centralized?
Cool. I think some more questions. I'm gonna go first to the back, Conrad, because you did one, but I think we have time to come to you. So I'll take two. I think Harsh and then Noel.
Hi, I'm Harsh from the Accountability Lab in Trinity College Dublin. I have sort of a quasi-legal question that when we try to scrape data from social media, some of it is innocent, but some of it can also be not so innocent. For example, when you're trying to see how these mediums affect elections or other things, suddenly it becomes political opinions and other things which make our DPOs very uneasy. And they worry about how the law is going to work. So, of course, we apply all the GDPR principles and we do purpose limitation, anonymization, and a bunch of other stuff. But even after this, what comes up suddenly is that, okay, what's written in the terms and conditions? And does it, prohibit scraping? And of course we go, so what? But sometimes this is not an easy legal answer. And I find that unfortunately now we are stuck between data protection and following contract law, and there's no clear guidance from any authority on how research should be enabled to allow, violating terms and conditions. And now it's become a problem that some of the funders are worried that we're violating terms. So, we have a mechanism for DSA that the approval via, going through the whole authority, but now they would prefer us to go through that rather than try and do scraping. So I think by giving like an alternative delayed mechanism, it's shutting down, legitimate scraping. And how do we address this? Can we get something from the GDPR authorities to clarify this is okay? Or can we get something from the consumer protection authorities?
Great, thanks. I'll get to Noel, and then I'll keep thinking and solve those legal problems. That's what we have to do.
Hello. I've got a bit of a hypothetical scenario question. So say, for example, you had a research project where the content of that project necessitate looking at content on the darknet. How would you deal with that? Because I think Luke raised an important point that, I think if you're scraping, even if you do line fishing on the darknet, it's obviously much more likely that you're going to get a lot of content that's very unsavory. So I don't know, just a practical question. What do you think?
That's good. Two difficult questions there. Let me turn to the lawyers first. The special category data, contract, data protection, Rust media, all these kind of exciting things. Luckily, the two people next to you have got very considered and full solutions to all of these problems. So, Sophie, do you want to?
Of course.
Give us
but
the
the fees
solution
first. I'd like to challenge you just a little bit, if I can. And don't get stuck with the word legal certainty. I would start like that. And try to put it further and say, if you had to make like a reasonable argument, what would you say? Because I don't think it's the right expectation just to think that we will get the perfect clear answer in the law. This is never going to come. Should it come? It's hard because these things are evolving so quickly, and the quality of the legislation and drafting is not getting better. It's just getting worse. So I'm not entirely sure we just want to call for more laws every day, especially when they are rushed, because they create even more questions. And so when it comes to special category data, this is true that in GDPR there is in that sense not full harmonization, because we need to go back at the member state level and then check what's there. That being said, there are different trends happening at the same time, and if you look at what's being done also for AI training in general, you can see that there is a tendency to think that even if you don't get it right in the first place, then you have a second iteration possible, and then you can correct. I don't have the perfect answer here. I'd like to have more clarity. Of course, I'd like to have that. But before using the rules, I'd like you to think also about harm in this place, and see, using your common sense, what is it that you are generating for the data subjects. There's been work done by the European Media Observatory or something. They had like a working group on that, and they drew distinction between what you collect and then what you derive from the data. And of course, when you derive special category data from the observed data that is not or does not appear to be special category data, then you might need to take more precautions. They have this, they are working with the concept of reasonable expectation of privacy, which is an old concept, but that might be a useful tool. Now one thing that could happen would be like more harmonization, maybe at the EU level, that might help at some stage. But yeah, these were my reactions. Sorry.
Great. Alex.
Yeah, and I think really building on that, I mean, in part, I think you need to find yourself a pragmatic person that can push things through.
Don't hire Alex.
It's fine.
She will never come to work for you. She's at UCL forever. It's fine.
It's got me involved in research now. But the reason I say that, and I do bang on about risk a lot. Side note, I did used to be in the army, and that's all about risk analysis. But the reason I do is because just seeing it in practice and seeing what we get through. So coming back to that example I said beforehand about GoFundMe and the data that came to me, and I just thought, you have no idea what you're doing, was that I had to read through, it was one family's GoFundMe page, which was eventually about the death of their father from cancer. So it started off with telling all these people about, he's got cancer, but he's going to beat it. These are our updates, these are our updates. And then he's going downhill, and then he eventually dies. And you're just thinking, why are you sending this to me, researcher? Like, that isn't something that family ever thought would be taken out in that context. You've got the conversation about whether or not that data was truly public, because did they understand it? You know, that's definitely a point to it. But are you demonstrating that you understand the value of the data, the impact of the data on individuals, and the impact of your use on the data? And quite often, because these questions come through ethical review rather than legal review, quite often if you're able to demonstrate, I know what risks I'm taking and this is how I'm mitigating it, that's how we get it through, that's how we're pragmatic. And I think that comes through to that darknet question again, because in the dark web, as we all know, the risks are just bigger. So some risks are really, really hard for a university to navigate. Child sexual abuse material, it's just illegal for us to have any of that on any of our systems at all. So how are you mitigating to make sure that those offences, which are just pure offences, you cannot have them regardless if anyone's looked at them? But then with the material itself, it's treated similarly quite often to, well, if you are doing research which involves knowingly breaking the law. So there was some research I dealt with questioning sex workers, and in that country, sex working was illegal. And so actually, this has nothing to do with web scraping, but we're quite used to, okay, well, this is valid research, but it's technically about criminal activity. So how do we work that? So I think that's why a lot of these questions can't just be data protection questions. No. They can't just be, let's change data protection law. They have to be, this is research like any other research. It's in an ethical review system like any other research. So how are we identifying and mitigating those risks with that underlying basis of, one of the risks is it may not be legal, but at least we're demonstrating how we understand the law and how we're putting in place mitigations to make sure that the university is protected should those laws be broken.
Particularly on the dark web question or anything else?
Just adding quickly, I think what Alexandra mentioned, that universities are quite used to something, I think is interesting. I think universities often are quite used to qualitative research. And going to do interviews and talking to sex workers, social workers, talking to children, talking about sexual violence survivors, you will find this training and this support from the university to do this, because there is a history of doing qualitative research. Sometimes doing quantitative research, there will not be the technical support, because we don't really know which protection safeguard should we put when we scrape the dark web, for instance. And I think there's a need to, both have technical capacity, both on the researcher side, but also on the university side. So in ethics and review committees, etc., often people don't have, you might have a set of people who will read your application and none of them have the technical background to understand what data scraping means. And I think there should be this sort of knowledge and training at this institutional level to be able to support researchers. And I think if there was this training across all universities, organizations, I think they would move a bit faster too.
I think on the dark web question as well, a lot of researchers currently use commercial tools, which only do text-based scraping, for example, from Tor. And that comes back to Alex's point that some offences are strict liability, but they particularly rate images. However, if you're lucky enough to be in the UK, then you can also be incriminated for having information that will be useful to a terrorist, which could be just text, could be any text at all. It could just be how to make a kind of glycerin bomb in like a single 3 sentences, and these offences are quite harsh. So just don't do research in the UK if you worry about that kind of thing. But don't worry, because those laws are only used to incriminate people for whom they have no other evidence of a crime. But want an easy charge to make. Yeah, let's go back to some questions from the floor. Conrad, and then I'll pass it here as well. These two.
I'm wondering, I mean, I think this is extremely important, right? So much of research relies on scrape, but I wonder who needs to act now on these things, right? And I mean, you talked about these keys. I'm not quite sure if people quite realize, I mean, this whole key approach, I mean, this exists, right? Like, how this works. I mean, I was like, I don't know, once in a blue moon, I open Chrome on my Android phone, and then I go in a capture, and I magically open something on my operating system. I don't have to click, but there's an audit, you know, my Android phone has a key that automatically passes the bot prevention. Right, so does Google need to act? Does Cloudflare need to act? Does the commission need to act? Who needs to act? I mean, we have some standards around. I mean, we have some precedent, the DSA to talk about researcher data access. And maybe further on the question of who needs to act, if people are interested in, I don't know, what researchers can do, together with my team and also with some people in Switzerland, Aurelia, with the Crocodile project, we're trying to write a report. It's pretty final, just to give some guidance on how do I navigate data protection, how do I navigate copyright, how do I navigate all of these things when I do data scraping. If that interested someone, and please reach out. I mean, we're always keen to get feedback and do things better. But yeah, who needs to act?
Fantastic question. And let's go over here and do send that report over. We'll try and make a website maybe for our project. We can put it on there.
Hi, thank you very much. Very interesting. My question is very much related to your questions, more or less. I'm thinking, I used to work in digital advertising, and then I moved into academia. And while I was working into digital advertising, that was not an issue at all. It was very easy to, get hold of data. And I'm working as a policy researcher at the moment on data access issues. And I've been talking with loads of academics and civil society as well, researchers and independent researchers as well. And you've already covered this. There's a huge discrepancy. Luc, I think he mentioned it before. There's a huge discrepancy between those who cannot have any kind of institutional support or legal advice whatsoever. What I've discovered by talking with independent researchers is that sometimes they don't even know that they can do things, but they start from the premise that we're not going to do it because we don't have a lawyer to back us up. So, if universities, and especially the research-intensive ones, are willing to start, uniting and having like a united voice, that would definitely help. However, at the moment in the UK, we have a momentum. Last summer, the DUAA Act received royal assent, and we're waiting for a public consultation at the moment. So if the gentleman before asked who needs to act, so my question essentially is, how much do you think that this issue is political predominantly, apart from everything else that I agree with all of you and all your remarks?
Two very great intertwined questions. Normative. What's going on? What should we do? Thomas, do you have thoughts of what we should? Who would be in the anti-bot world, for example? Who would we need to bring to the table if we wanted to have a discussion about this?
Well, all of the big actors for a start, but I don't see them acting without any incentives to act. Their business case is basically to protect their customers, and allowing a key to the front door would be a strange way of protecting their customers, I think. We've seen that they do not want to be scraped, so I don't see them putting that forward as a mean. So that is indeed a very good question. I think it's basically a legislative issue, but I'm no lawyer, so I'll let you you lawyers decide it.
We can't really write anything in the laws. no, I want to go back to what Harsh said actually, and the impact of the DSA on scraping, because Article 4 T12 is not necessarily might be read in very different ways. And one of these ways might be actually undermining scraping, which is what we try to explain in the paper. So yeah, there is a leeway for interpretation, and we need to be careful. I don't have a right answer and a good answer. I was worried that setting up that framework could potentially also undermine lots of research in the public interest that is not targeted towards necessarily the biggest player in any case, but. Now if done well with the right formulation, it would be nice to have that in the legislation. So that would be like some clear flags in there, which seem to be missing in different places, but it's not necessarily easy to get the right wording very quickly. So.
Also, I think technically, we might think that, I don't know, say CAPTCHAs and the scraping, it's a cat and mouse game. Like they're coming with new techniques and now you need to solve a puzzle, but we're going to have local AI models that will solve the puzzle. And it's also possible it just is going to end and we will not be able, I don't know. So we talked about Cloudflare, but I don't know how many of you saw the Google proposal to have a CAPTCHA. Like basically you need a phone and you need to scan the QR code and then you need to open on a phone. And probably to close proximity, Bluetooth, it detects that there is a phone. And if you don't have the latest iPhone or Android models, you need to install an app from Google. And I don't know if this can be automated with a virtual phone on device, etc. And if we need a physical person with a phone in front of the device to scan, etc., it's not really feasible at scale on, a university server, on a laptop of any independent researchers to do these sort of things. And it might just possibly be the end of scraping. So we definitely to have some muscle and say, that is just not feasible, and we need institution to protect it and say, no, there is actually a question of access to information that is an important rights in democracy, and we need to make sure that these companies don't pull the cord on scraping.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think. Yeah, please.
Yeah, just one more thing. Is that in our case, we usually like to rephrase that to appropriate the expression, we use the fishing line approach, and usually with institutions. I've mentioned it, and I think it's a very huge issue that we do not have the open data policies at the institutions, or at least that they are not followed in my experience. In the case of social sciences, because these are huge amounts of data, very qualitative data, and we do not have access in a meaningful way, which is, I think, one of the biggest hurdles. Before speaking about, well, not before, but in parallel to speaking about scraping Twitters and so on, we have, in my case, legal decisions. Yeah. They are meant to be public. Yeah. I have no idea why I can't download them as bulk.
Oh, great. I wanted to add to the panel one topic. We're ending up soon. We're coming to the conclusion of the panel, and thanks for the audience for being so amazing with your comments and the stimulation. One thing we haven't talked about is data rights here. So given the kind of Dragnet scraping, when people collect large amounts of data about everything that's being posted on a service or the internet or scraped around the place, or even in being subjects within legal decisions and so on, people are ostensibly supposed to have some rights over these. They can go to a university and they can say, hey, university, did you ever do any research about me that mentions me? Can you tell me what it is, where I am? Can I be erased, or can I set some negotiation over it? Should I be informed about it, particularly with scraping when I do it? Should I know that scraping is going on? So I wondered if the panel had any reflections on just the dilemmas and difficulties of the data rights rather than the security and process obligations, and how we might start to reason about those, maybe not just within the GDPR, but maybe more broadly and ethically, as we've kind of highlighted, I think, throughout. What's the normatively right thing to do, as well as maybe what's the legally plausible or correct direction?
I guess I can come in from sort of the personal experience of, because my team is the team that deals with data subject rights. And I wonder if this is the potential shift, Luke, that you were saying about the change in way research is happening. Because actually at the moment, if we get in a data subject rights request for a research project, they're some of the simplest we ever have to deal with. Because actually the research project is so concerned about ethical consent and making sure that people are kept up to date. And even if they don't have to remove someone from data set, they most likely will if it's possible. And also all the data is held in a nice place altogether. So the way our processes are set up are for identifiability of data subjects. We know who they are. We have those consent forms. We can go and get them. And I wonder, yes, Michael, as you're saying, and as Luke was reflecting on, if we're moving to a different way of researching, we just might not have the systems set up to be able to respond to those data subject rights. And so I think a lot of my job will be working out where the exemptions apply. To be honest, that's most of my job anyway. But do we have to tell people? How do we tell them? Is a notice on our website enough? And then if they do come, if it is research, they probably don't have the right for erasure, etc. But yeah, kind of what is it that we definitely have to provide to individuals, and then how can we do it?
Other reflections?
No, I mean, in relation to that, I think information is one of the difficult issues, I suppose, to get right under the abstraction law. And just to flip the perspective, so data access rights, but also data donation. So these rights can also be useful as a source of data for research. And here we have some would say a very complicated stack of different laws with different types of access rights and portability rights. That being said, that there is an attempt to try to extend their reach. They can target personal and non-personal data depending upon the context. So this could be explored further as well.
And I think to go to Luke's point as well around on-device, Google and captures and so on, it's very important to see that Cloudflare also is doing this with using Apple operating system to prove that you have a real authentic Apple device to skip captures and similar. And it's going to be, I think, very interesting. And we've had some discussions in other panels throughout CPDP around agents and the governance of agents and the developing legal frameworks and ethical and private governance around those. And we haven't quite had, I think, the discussion of agents in research yet. I think that's sort of obviously sock puppets and similar, can be seen in that way, but it hasn't sort of streamed in as the big challenge. And certainly, I think these issues are not going to go away. But broadly, that kind of unstructured data and the difficulties that it poses conceptually, I think is difficult. And the question at DUA as well, and the consultation and the integration and the political questions around the UK changes to the law. Stay tuned. There's actually some publications coming out around that. I think from some of us have been involved with the regulator in those discussions and those publications. So that should be hopefully. I think there is movement to think about how all this fits together. But I mean, at least we feel it's maybe more difficult and needs more people at the table. This has been a panel that's been funded by a UCL project by our internal funding called Grand Challenges. So we're very grateful to UCL. Yeah, we're just finishing, thank you. We're very grateful. We're doing research on this at the moment. If you, in your organizations, are experiencing these kind of challenges, get in touch. We feel that, as has been mentioned, cooperation is really key. Bringing these organizations to the table and having those voices and thinking independent researchers and those things are the kind of discussions we want to bring together and have, because it does feel like this is less of a moment for complying and working out what the tick box is, and actually we need action, as you said, Conrad. We need to work out who should act and how, and that political moment is something that maybe universities aren't used to. We do lobbying on other stuff, but lobbying around data protection sort of has a different tone and involves different actors. And this isn't one where it's even talking to the regulator necessarily, maybe on where we have to work out how to bring these organizations to the table, maybe to get the proof they don't want to cooperate so that we can think about the legislative steps and the reasons for that. So we'd love to continue this conversation. Please do get in touch with us. And thanks for all coming today.